Officer Brenda Miller's voice, sharp as shattered glass, sliced through the pre-dawn silence, each word a loaded threat. This wasn't a routine stop. This was a predator cornering its prey, and Maya knew with a sickening certainty that her long night was about to get infinitely worse. The cold metal of the officer's disdain was more chilling than the wind whipping around her. The biting Chicago wind whipped around Maya Jones, tugging at the worn scarf she'd pulled tight around her neck. It was late, well past midnight, and the city's usual cacophony had dwindled to a low, distant hum. Each step she took away from the gleaming office tower, her second cleaning job of the day, was a small victory against the bone-deep weariness that clung to her. All she wanted was the warmth of her small apartment and the quiet presence of her sleeping grandmother. Suddenly, a pair of headlights sliced through the darkness, a police cruiser idling by the curb just ahead. Maya's heart gave a small, involuntary lurch. She kept her head down, quickening her pace, a familiar unease settling in. It was a reflex, honed by too many stories, too many shared anxieties within her community. "Ma'am, hold it right there." The voice was sharp, authoritative, and undeniably female. Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. She turned slowly to see Officer Brenda Miller approaching, flashlight beam cutting a stark path towards her. Miller was known in this part of downtown, known for her rigid demeanor and an unyielding, almost zealous approach to keeping order. "Good evening, officer," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady, respectful. "Is there a problem?" Officer Miller's eyes, a pale, assessing blue, swept over Maya from head to toe, lingering for a moment on her faded work uniform and the simple tote bag slung over her shoulder. "Routine check, ma'am. What are you doing out so late in this area?" "I just finished my shift, officer. I work at the Ellison building," Maya explained, gesturing vaguely behind her. "Your ID, please." Miller's tone was clipped, impatient. Maya fumbled in her bag, her fingers stiff from the cold, finally producing her worn driver's license. Miller took it, her gaze flicking between the photo and Maya's face, a small, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. "Maya Jones," Miller read aloud, drawing out the name. "And what's in the bag, Maya?" "Just my lunchbox, officer, and a book." A wave of indignation began to bubble beneath Maya's forced composure. This felt less like a routine check, and more like an interrogation. "Let's see it." It wasn't a request. With a sigh Maya knew better than to voice, she opened her tote. Miller peered inside with her flashlight, then, with a sudden, almost careless movement, reached in and pulled out the small, dented plastic container that held Maya's leftover dinner, a meager portion of rice and beans, carefully saved for her grandmother. In that same instant, as if by a clumsy accident that felt anything but, the container slipped from Miller's gloved hand. It clattered onto the grimy sidewalk, the lid popping open, its contents spilling out in a pathetic heap. Maya gasped, a small choked sound. That was her grandmother's meal. Officer Miller didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. Instead, a look of something akin to disdain crossed her face as she nudged the spilled food with the toe of her polished boot. "Clumsy, aren't we?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You should be more careful with your belongings, Maya." Tears pricked at Maya's eyes, hot and stinging against the cold night air. Humiliation, anger, and a profound weariness washed over her. She wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it, the casual cruelty. But she knew it would be useless. Worse than useless. It would only invite more trouble. So, she did the only thing she could. She bent down, her body aching, and began to scoop the spilled rice and beans back into the broken container, her fingers trembling. The officer watched her, a silent, towering figure of judgment. From a darkened office window high above in the Ellison building, Noah Williams, an architect working late on a deadline, had seen it all. The flashing lights, the young woman stopped, the officer's aggressive posture, and then the unmistakable, deliberate act of dropping the food container. His stomach clenched. He'd reached for his phone instinctively, hitting record, though the distance and the poor lighting made the details blurry. But the intent, the cold indifference of the officer, was sickeningly clear. Officer Miller, apparently satisfied with the display of power, finally handed back Maya's ID. "Try to stay out of trouble, Maya," she said, her voice carrying a final dismissive note. Then she turned and walked back to her cruiser, leaving Maya alone on the curb with her ruined meal and a spirit that felt as bruised and broken as the plastic container in her hands. The silence that descended was heavier now, filled with the unspoken. Maya slowly got to her feet, clutching the soiled container. The hunger gnawing at her stomach was nothing compared to the ache in her heart. This wasn't just about spilled food. It was about dignity, about being made to feel less than human, simply for existing in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong skin. And high above, Noah Williams saved the blurry video, his jaw tight with a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. He didn't know the young woman's name yet, but he knew one thing for sure. Officer Brenda Miller was not going to get away with this. The night was cold, but a different kind of fire had just been lit. The walk home was a long, cold blur for Maya. Each step echoed the officer's dismissive tone, the image of her grandmother's dinner scattered on the sidewalk, replaying in her mind. It wasn't just the food, it was the casual cruelty, the utter lack of respect that stung the most. By the time she reached the worn-down apartment building she called home, the anger had solidified into a heavy ache in her chest. Her grandmother, Nana Rose, was asleep in her armchair, a tattered quilt pulled up to her chin. The soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing was a small comfort. Maya tiptoed into the tiny kitchen, her stomach rumbling. She looked at the meager contents of her refrigerator, a half-empty carton of milk, a few wilting vegetables. The spilled rice and beans had been a carefully planned meal. Sighing, Maya prepared a simple cup of tea for herself, her mind still reeling. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered an officer with an attitude, but Officer Miller's disdain had felt personal, pointed. It made her feel small, insignificant, and a deep, simmering resentment began to take root. Meanwhile, across town, Noah Williams couldn't shake the image from his office window. The blurry video on his phone, though not crystal clear, captured the essence of the officer's callousness. He wasn't an activist, just an architect who believed in basic decency. What he'd witnessed felt like a gross violation of that. The next morning, Noah made a few discreet inquiries. He had designed the Ellison building, and his firm still had a good relationship with the management. He described the young cleaning woman he'd seen, her approximate time of departure. It didn't take long for the building manager, a pragmatic man named Mr. Henderson, to identify Maya Jones. Maya? Yes, she works the late shift here, Henderson confirmed. Quiet girl, good worker, keeps to herself. Why do you ask, Mr. Williams? Noah was vague. I just happened to see her leaving last night and thought she looked a bit distressed, wanted to make sure everything was all right. Henderson, sensing Noah's genuine concern, and perhaps not wanting any trouble involving a high-profile tenant like Noah's firm, offered a little more. She's had it tough, I hear. Takes care of her sick grandmother. Works 2 jobs, this one and another over at the city center complex during the day. 2 jobs, a sick grandmother. The information only deepened Noah's resolve. This wasn't just about an overzealous cop. It was about a young woman struggling to survive, being kicked when she was already down. His first instinct was to go straight to the NOPD with the video. But his friend, a sharp-witted lawyer named Ben Carter, different from the officer in the previous story draft, to avoid confusion, quickly disabused him of that notion. Noah, that video is grainy at best, Ben said, after Noah showed it to him. Her face isn't clear. The officer's badge isn't visible. Internal affairs will eat you alive. They'll say you're misinterpreting, or worse, that you have an agenda. You need more than this if you want to make a real difference for Miss Jones and for Officer Miller to face any consequences. Ben's pragmatism was a sobering counterpoint to Noah's indignation. So, what do we do? Noah asked, frustrated. First, we find out more about Officer Brenda Miller, Ben suggested. See if there's a pattern. And second, we find a way to help Miss Jones directly, without making her a pawn in a messy fight she might not be prepared for. Noah agreed. He wasn't looking to become a crusader, but he couldn't let this go. He thought about Maya, alone on that cold street, her dinner spilled. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the grand scheme of things. But sometimes it was the small things, the seemingly insignificant acts of cruelty or kindness that defined who people were. And Noah knew which side he wanted to be on. He started with a simple, anonymous gesture. Through a contact at a local grocery chain, he arranged for a gift card to be discreetly mailed to Maya's address, no sender listed. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a way to perhaps replace a spilled meal and offer a sliver of unexpected light in what seemed like a very dark night for Maya Jones. A few days after the incident, Maya was at her day job, cleaning offices at the city center complex, when her supervisor called her aside. "Maya, Mrs. Gable," a kind, no-nonsense woman began. "There's an opening for a senior custodian position at the Hawthorne Solutions corporate office. It's a preferred partner of ours. Better pay, more regular hours, full benefits. They specifically asked if we had any reliable staff to recommend. I thought of you." Maya was stunned. "Me, Mrs. Gable? But I haven't applied for anything. They're looking to fill it quickly." "Mrs. Gable said with a smile. "Consider it an internal recommendation based on your excellent work here. The interview is tomorrow, if you're interested. It's a great opportunity, Maya." A whirlwind of emotions churned within Maya. Better pay, full benefits. It sounded too good to be true. It would mean she could finally afford better medication for Nana Rose, maybe even save a little. But a nagging doubt lingered. Why her? Was this some kind of mistake? The interview at Hawthorne Solutions, a sleek, modern office downtown, was surprisingly straightforward. The HR manager was professional and courteous. He asked about her experience, her work ethic. He didn't ask about her race, her neighborhood, or why she was out late at night. He focused solely on her qualifications. By the end of the week, Maya had a job offer. It felt like a miracle, a sudden, unexpected ray of sunshine after a long, bleak storm. She accepted immediately, her heart soaring. That same week, an anonymous grocery gift card arrived in the mail. Overwhelmed, Maya cried tears of gratitude, attributing it all to some unseen blessing, a turn of good fortune she desperately needed. She told Nana Rose the good news, and for the first time in months, she saw a genuine, hopeful smile light up her grandmother's frail face. Noah Williams, from his office, watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. Hawthorne Solutions was one of his firm's major clients. A carefully worded recommendation from him, citing a community outreach initiative his firm was supporting to help hard-working individuals find better opportunities, had been all it took. He had ensured Maya's application was fast-tracked, her interview fair and focused. The gift card was another small, untraceable gesture. He wanted to help, but he also wanted to respect her dignity, her agency. He didn't want her to feel like a charity case. Meanwhile, his lawyer friend Ben Carter had started digging into Officer Brenda Miller's record. "It's not as clean as it looks on paper, Noah," Ben reported. "No major disciplinary actions, but I'm hearing whispers. Talk of a quick temper, a tendency to be overly aggressive in certain neighborhoods, particularly with minority residents. Nothing a formal complaint has stuck to, but the smoke is there. We need to find the fire." Ben explained that building a case against an officer like Miller was a slow, painstaking process. They needed concrete evidence, credible witnesses willing to go on record. A tall order when dealing with a system often designed to protect its own. Maya, oblivious to Noah's machinations or Ben's investigation, threw herself into her new job at Hawthorne Solutions. The work was still demanding, but the environment was more respectful, the pay significantly better. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of optimism about the future. She started saving a little money, dreaming of perhaps one day taking a course, improving her skills. Yet, the memory of Officer Miller, of the cold disdain in her eyes and the spilled food on the sidewalk, still lingered, a shadow of doubt in the back of her mind. Had she just been unlucky that night? Or was there something more, something uglier, lurking beneath the surface of her city? She tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on the good fortune that had come her way. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, the chill of that curb would return, a reminder of a vulnerability she couldn't quite escape. Life at Hawthorne Solutions was a welcome change for Maya. The regular hours allowed her more time with Nana Rose, and the increased pay eased the constant financial strain. She even started a small savings jar, tucking away a few dollars each week, a tangible symbol of her newfound hope. The anonymous grocery gift cards continued to arrive sporadically, a mysterious blessing she had come to gratefully accept without question. Noah Williams, satisfied that Maya was in a more stable situation, shifted his focus, alongside Ben Carter, more intensely towards Officer Brenda Miller. Ben's legal instincts told him that Miller's aggressive encounter with Maya wasn't an isolated lapse in judgment. Officers like her, they don't just snap once, Ben had said. There's usually a history, a pattern. We just need to find the people willing to talk. Their investigation led them down a rabbit hole of unofficial complaints and community whispers. They discovered that Officer Miller had a reputation in several predominantly minority neighborhoods for her zero-tolerance approach, which often translated into harassment and intimidation. They heard stories of unwarranted stops, overly aggressive questioning, and a general air of contempt. Most of these incidents, however, had never resulted in formal complaints. Fear of retaliation, a sense of futility, or simply not knowing how to navigate the system had kept many victims silent. One name, however, kept surfacing: Marcus Thorne, a young community organizer who had reportedly clashed with Miller several times during peaceful protests and outreach events. Ben managed to track Marcus down. Marcus, a fiery, articulate man in his late 20s, listened intently as Ben, without revealing Maya's identity or Noah's involvement, explained they were looking into Officer Miller's conduct. Officer Miller, Marcus let out a mirthless laugh. Yeah, I know her. She's a piece of work. Thinks her badge gives her a license to bully anyone who doesn't look like her or agree with her. We've had several run-ins. She's got a real chip on her shoulder. He recounted an incident where Miller had unnecessarily escalated a situation at a community food drive, accusing volunteers of obstructing a public sidewalk and threatening arrests. She enjoys making people feel small, Marcus concluded. She thrives on it. While Marcus's testimony was compelling, it was still largely anecdotal in a legal sense. They needed something more concrete, something that couldn't be easily dismissed as a personality clash. Noah, growing frustrated with the slow pace, decided to take a more direct, albeit risky, approach. Using a discreet, untraceable email address, he sent a carefully worded message to a local investigative journalist, Sarah Jenkins, who was known for her work exposing police misconduct. He didn't reveal himself or Maya, but he provided enough details about the incident Maya had experienced, along with the general area and Officer Miller's name, to pique her interest. He also hinted at a pattern of similar behavior. It was a gamble. Jenkins could ignore it, or worse, her investigation could inadvertently put Maya at risk if not handled delicately. But Noah felt they needed another angle, another way to bring pressure. The echoes of Miller's actions were out there. They just needed someone to amplify the whispers into a roar. Weeks passed. Sarah Jenkins, the investigative journalist, had acknowledged Noah's anonymous tip with a curt, "looking into it," but nothing further had materialized. Maya, meanwhile, was settling into her routine at Hawthorne Solutions, slowly allowing herself to breathe a little easier. The fear from that night had faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. Then, one crisp autumn evening, as Maya was leaving work, it happened again. She was waiting for the bus at a stop a few blocks from Hawthorne Solutions, a more well-lit and populated area than her old route. She noticed a knopped cruiser pull up slowly, and her stomach did a familiar flip. Her eyes darted to the officer behind the wheel. It wasn't Miller. A small sigh of relief escaped her. But as the first officer got out, another figure emerged from the passenger side, tall, stern, with those same cold, assessing blue eyes. Officer Brenda Miller. Maya's blood ran cold. Of all the officers in Chicago, why her, why now? It had to be a coincidence, she told herself. A terrible, cruel coincidence. Miller spotted her almost immediately. A flicker of something, recognition, annoyance, crossed her face before settling back into its usual impassive mask. She and her partner began a slow, deliberate patrol of the bus stop, their presence an unspoken intimidation. Maya tried to make herself small, to blend in with the other commuters. But Miller seemed to be drawn to her. She stopped directly in front of Maya. "Well, well, well," Miller said, her voice low and laced with a familiar condescension. "Maya Jones, isn't it? Still out and about at this hour?" Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "Good evening, officer," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm just waiting for my bus." "Bus, huh?" Miller's eyes raked over Maya's slightly newer, cleaner work attire from Hawthorne Solutions. "Moved up in the world, have we? No more scrubbing floors at the Ellison building?" The implication was clear. the tone mocking. Maya felt a flush of anger, but also a surge of courage she hadn't possessed during their last encounter. She had a good job now. She was doing well. She wouldn't be cowed so easily. "I have a new position, yes," Maya said, her voice a little firmer this time. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Just making sure our citizens are safe," Miller said, a smirk playing on her lips. "And that everyone is where they're supposed to be." She took a step closer. "You know, Maya, some people just can't seem to stay out of trouble, always finding themselves in situations." This time, Maya didn't just endure it. This time she had her phone in her coat pocket, and with a subtle movement, her thumb found the record button. She'd learned her lesson. "I'm not looking for any trouble, officer," Maya said, meeting Miller's gaze directly. "I'm just trying to get home to my grandmother." "Grandmother. Right," Miller said, her eyes narrowing. "You be careful on these streets, Maya. You never know who you might run into." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Just then, the bus pulled up. Several people, who had been watching the interaction with a mixture of curiosity and unease, began to board. Miller and her partner stepped back, their intimidation seemingly complete. As Maya quickly moved towards the bus, a young man who had been standing nearby, also waiting, caught her eye. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of support before turning away. It was a tiny gesture, but in that moment it meant the world to Maya. She wasn't entirely alone. Shaken but resolute, Maya boarded the bus, her phone still recording. The encounter was shorter, less physically violating than the first, but the malice was just as potent, and this time she had a clearer recording. This time, Officer Brenda Miller might have just overplayed her hand. The second encounter with Officer Miller left Maya shaken but also strangely empowered. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with a steely resolve. She immediately called Noah, her voice trembling as she recounted what had happened. "She recognized me, Noah. She knew who I was. She was trying to intimidate me." Noah listened, his anger flaring. "Are you okay, Maya? Did she do anything?" "No, not physically this time, but the threat was there. I got it on audio, Noah. Clearer this time." This was the break they had been waiting for. The new recording, combined with the blurry video from the first incident and the anecdotal evidence Ben Carter had been gathering, started to form a more compelling picture. Noah immediately contacted Ben. "We have something, Ben." Miller confronted Maya again. "We have a new recording." Ben listened to the audio Maya sent. "This is good, Maya, Noah," he said, a note of excitement in his voice. Her words, her tone, it's clearly harassment. It shows a pattern, a vendetta even. This, combined with Marcus Thorne's willingness to now provide a sworn affidavit about his encounters, and the other whispers we've collected, we might actually have a case that Internal Affairs can't easily dismiss. Simultaneously, Sarah Jenkins, the investigative journalist Noah had anonymously tipped off, contacted him again. "That officer you mentioned, Miller?" Jenkins said. "I've been hearing more about her. Seems like your friend isn't the only one she's been leaning on. I'm close to publishing something, but I need something more concrete to really make it stick, an on-the-record source, a clear piece of evidence." Noah, after consulting with Ben and getting Maya's hesitant but courageous consent, made a decision. It was time to connect the dots for Jenkins. He arranged a meeting, and with Maya's permission shared her full story, including the new audio recording and the still blurry video of the first incident. He also put Jenkins in touch with Marcus Thorne. Jenkins was a seasoned pro. She listened, asked sharp questions, and her eyes lit up with the intensity of a journalist who knew she had a significant story. "This is more than just one bad cop, Mr. Williams," she said. "This has the stench of a systemic issue, of a culture of impunity." Over the next week, Jenkins worked relentlessly. She cross-referenced information, interviewed other potential, though still mostly anonymous sources, and built a powerful narrative. The NOPD, when approached for comment, gave their standard non-committal response about taking all allegations seriously. Then, the article dropped. It was a front-page exposé in the Chicago Sentinel, a major city newspaper Jenkins also freelanced for. The headline was stark. "Pattern of harassment, Officer Brenda Miller under scrutiny after multiple accusations." The article detailed Maya's story, using her name with her permission, including the spilled food and the subsequent verbal harassment at the bus stop. It featured Marcus Thorne's on-the-record account of Miller's behavior. It referenced other, unnamed sources corroborating a pattern of aggressive conduct, particularly in minority neighborhoods. It even included a carefully analyzed transcript of the clearer audio Maya had recorded. The impact was immediate and significant. The NOPD, already under pressure from various community groups regarding police conduct, found itself in a full-blown PR crisis. Calls for Officer Miller's suspension and a thorough, transparent investigation flooded the news, social media, and the mayor's office. Officer Brenda Miller, who had perhaps thought her second, more subtle encounter with Maya would go unnoticed, suddenly found herself at the center of a media firestorm. The thread she had carelessly pulled when she harassed Maya was now unraveling, threatening to bring down more than just her own career. The community, armed with Maya's courage and Noah's quiet persistence, was finally making its voice impossible to ignore. Sarah Jenkins's exposé in the Chicago Sentinel was like a match to dry tinder. The story, with Maya's named account at its center, ignited a firestorm of public outrage that the NOPD could no longer contain with carefully worded press releases or promises of internal reviews. The clarity of Maya's second audio recording, transcribed in the article, left little room for misinterpretation of Officer Miller's threatening tone. Phone lines at City Hall and NOPD headquarters were jammed. Social media exploded with number Justice for Maya Jones and number Fire Officer Miller. Community leaders, civil rights organizations, and even some local politicians began to publicly call for Officer Miller's immediate suspension pending a full, independent investigation. Not just another internal NOPD review. Maya found herself an unintentional public figure. Reporters camped outside her apartment building. Her photo, a candid shot taken from her Hawthorne Solutions employee ID that Jenkins had managed to acquire, was suddenly everywhere. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but also strangely liberating. Her story was out. She was no longer suffering in silence. Noah Williams, though he had anticipated a strong reaction, was taken aback by the sheer velocity of it. He and Ben Carter worked to shield Maya as much as possible, handling media inquiries through Ben's office and ensuring Maya had a support system. Nana Rose, though worried for her granddaughter, also expressed a quiet pride. "You did what was right, child," she'd said, her voice frail but firm. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Officer Brenda Miller, once an intimidating figure on the streets, was now facing a level of scrutiny she had never imagined. She was hounded by reporters, her picture splashed across newspapers and websites. The NOPD, forced into a corner, officially suspended her with pay, pending the outcome of a comprehensive investigation. It was a small concession, but a significant one. The pressure, however, didn't just come from the public. Inside the NOPD, factions were forming. Some officers, particularly those in Miller's immediate circle, or those who shared her aggressive policing philosophy, quietly resented the public outcry, viewing it as an attack on all police. They saw Miller as a scapegoat. Others, however, particularly younger officers and those in more community-focused roles, felt a sense of relief that problematic behavior was finally being addressed, albeit under duress. The blue wall of silence was showing visible cracks. Marcus Thorne, the community organizer, became a prominent voice in the public discourse, sharing his own experiences with Officer Miller and calling for broader police reform. He organized peaceful rallies outside NOPD headquarters, where Maya's story was a central theme. For Maya, seeing the outpouring of support was both heartening and daunting. She hadn't asked for this spotlight, but now that she was in it, she felt a responsibility to see it through. Noah was a constant source of strength, his quiet presence, a reassurance that she wasn't alone. Their shared purpose had forged a bond between them that went deeper than either had initially anticipated. They found themselves talking for hours, not just about the case, but about their lives, their hopes, their fears. The city was watching. The NOPD was under a microscope. The storm Maya's quiet courage had helped unleash was now raging, and no one knew exactly where or how it would end. But one thing was clear. The silence had been irrevocably shattered. As the public pressure on the NOPD intensified, so did the efforts to discredit Maya and defend Officer Miller. The police union, a powerful entity known for its aggressive tactics in protecting its members, launched a full-scale counter-offensive. Anonymous sources began leaking information to sympathetic media outlets, painting Maya as an opportunist, someone with a supposed grudge against the police. They dredged up minor, irrelevant details from her past, a late rent payment years ago, a minor disagreement with a previous landlord, twisting them into evidence of a troubled character. The online attacks were particularly vicious, with trolls and anonymous accounts flooding social media with hateful, often racially charged, comments directed at Maya. Officer Miller, though officially suspended, was not idle. Through her union representatives, she gave a carefully curated interview to a conservative talk radio host, portraying herself as the victim of a witch hunt, a dedicated officer being unfairly targeted by anti-police activists and a manipulative accuser. She claimed her words to Maya at the bus stop were taken out of context and that she was merely concerned for public safety. The NOPD's internal investigation, meanwhile, seemed to be dragging its feet, a tactic many suspected was designed to let the public furor die down. Key witnesses reported feeling intimidated during their interviews with internal affairs investigators, who seemed more interested in finding fault with Maya or Marcus Thorne than in scrutinizing Miller's actions. Maya, though prepared for a fight, found the personal attacks deeply wounding. "They're trying to make me out to be a liar, a villain," she confided in Noah, her voice heavy with frustration. "It's like they'll do anything to avoid admitting one of their own did something wrong." Noah, equally outraged, worked with Ben Carter to combat the misinformation. Ben issued cease and desist letters to outlets, publishing defamatory content, and released statements refuting the false narratives. But it felt like playing whack-a-mole. As soon as one rumor was quashed, another would spring up. The most insidious attack came when a blurry photo, allegedly showing Maya arguing heatedly with a different uniformed individual, not a police officer, perhaps a security guard from a previous job, was circulated online. The caption implied Maya had a history of aggressive behavior towards authority figures. It was a deepfake, a cleverly manipulated image designed to sow doubt about Maya's character. It took Ben Carter and a tech-savvy volunteer several agonizing days to forensically debunk the photo, but by then, the damage had been done. The image had spread, and for some, the seed of doubt had been planted. This was a new low. It wasn't just a defense of Miller anymore. It was a coordinated, malicious campaign to destroy Maya's reputation. The stakes were getting higher, and the fight was becoming uglier. Maya felt the immense pressure, the feeling of being under siege. But looking at the determined faces of Noah, Ben, and Marcus, and remembering the quiet support of her grandmother and the community, she found the strength to keep going. They wouldn't break her. The deepfake photo, while temporarily damaging, ultimately backfired on those who had circulated it. When Ben Carter, with irrefutable technical evidence, exposed it as a fabrication during a press conference arranged by Sarah Jenkins, public sympathy swung even more decisively in Maya's favor. The attempt to smear her was seen as a desperate, underhanded tactic, further eroding the credibility of Officer Miller's defenders and the NOPD's handling of the case. This public relations disaster for the NOPD, coupled with mounting pressure from city officials who were growing tired of the negative spotlight, finally forced a significant shift in the internal investigation. A new lead investigator, Captain Eva Rostova, a woman known for her integrity and no-nonsense approach, was assigned to the case, ostensibly to ensure renewed thoroughness and impartiality. Captain Rostova wasn't part of Miller's old guard. She was a reformer, albeit a pragmatic one, who understood that the department's legitimacy was on the line. She re-interviewed Maya, this time with a noticeable respect and a focus on Miller's actions, not Maya's character. She meticulously reviewed all the evidence, including the newly debunked deepfake, which she viewed as a serious attempt to obstruct justice. Noah and Ben provided Captain Rostova with every piece of information they had gathered, including detailed timelines, Marcus Thorne's sworn affidavit, and the names of other individuals who had experienced Miller's aggressive behavior, even if they were still hesitant to come forward officially. The turning point, however, came from an unexpected source within the NOPD itself. Officer Miller's partner from the night of the second encounter at the bus stop, Officer David Chen, had been wrestling with his conscience. He was a younger officer, and while he hadn't directly participated in Miller's harassment of Maya, his silence had made him complicit. The public outcry, Maya's courage, and particularly the exposure of the deepfake, had finally pushed him to act. Officer Chen, through his own attorney, approached Captain Rostova and offered to provide a full, truthful account of what happened at the bus stop, as well as other instances where he had witnessed Officer Miller's unprofessional conduct. He even had a personal dashcam recording from his own vehicle. Not standard NOPD issue, but something he used for his own protection. That, while not capturing the entire bus stop incident, corroborated Maya's presence and Miller's aggressive demeanor towards her. It also captured some of Miller's disparaging remarks about Maya after she had boarded the bus. Officer Chen's testimony was a bombshell. It was an insider's account, a direct contradiction to Miller's claims of professionalism. His dashcam footage, though not a smoking gun for the initial assault, provided damning context and further evidence of Miller's pattern of behavior and specific animosity towards Maya. Captain Rostova now had a much stronger case. The combination of Maya's consistent testimony, the audio recordings, Marcus Thorne's affidavit, the, now even more credible, anecdotal evidence of other incidents, and crucially, Officer Chen's corroborating statement and footage painted an undeniable picture of Officer Brenda Miller as an officer who abused her authority and harbored clear biases. The walls were closing in on Officer Miller. The unraveling thread had now become a tightening noose. The quiet hope for justice was beginning to sound a much stronger, more resonant note. With Officer Chen's damning testimony and dashcam footage added to the growing mountain of evidence, Captain Rostova's investigation into Officer Brenda Miller concluded with a speed and decisiveness that surprised many. The internal report, when finally presented to Police Chief Frank Donovan, was unequivocal. Officer Miller had engaged in a pattern of harassment, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The report specifically cited the 2 encounters with Maya Jones, corroborated by audio evidence and Officer Chen's testimony, as well as credible accounts from Marcus Thorne and other, previously hesitant, witnesses who had been emboldened to come forward. Chief Donovan, facing a political firestorm and an irrefutable internal report, had little room to maneuver. The police union's defense of Miller, while still present, was significantly muted, their usual aggressive tactics blunted by the weight of the evidence and the potential for even greater public relations damage if they continued to overtly protect her. The NOPD announced its findings in a formal press conference. Chief Donovan, looking weary but resolute, stated that Officer Brenda Miller's actions were a serious breach of public trust and a violation of the standards expected of every member of the New Orleans Police Department. The disciplinary action was swift and severe. Officer Brenda Miller was terminated from the NOPD, effective immediately. The announcement sent a ripple of shock and, for many, profound relief through the city. It was a rare instance of a police officer facing such a definitive consequence for misconduct, not involving a fatality or a major, widely publicized crime. For Maya, the news was a complex wave of emotions. There was relief, certainly, a sense that a heavy weight had finally been lifted. There was a quiet vindication, knowing that her truth had, in the end, prevailed. But there was no elation, no desire for vengeance. The ordeal had taken its toll. "It's over," she said softly to Noah, who was with her when the news broke. "She can't hurt anyone else like that, not with a badge." "You did it, Maya," Noah said, his voice filled with admiration. "Your courage made this happen." "We did it," Maya corrected him, looking at Noah, then thinking of Ben Carter, Sarah Jenkins, Marcus Thorne, Mrs. Dubois, Officer Chen, and even the anonymous grocer. So many people helped. I wasn't alone. Officer Miller did not go quietly. She threatened lawsuits, claimed she was a scapegoat, a victim of political correctness, but her bluster found little traction. The evidence against her was too strong, public opinion too firmly set. Her career in law enforcement was, for all intents and purposes, finished. The city's independent police oversight board, spurred by the Miller case and the public outcry, also announced its own review of NOPD's complaint and disciplinary processes, promising recommendations for systemic reforms. It was a small step, but a step in the right direction. In the days that followed, Maya found herself a reluctant symbol of hope for many. People would stop her on the street, not for interviews, but just to say thank you, to share a brief story of their own, to acknowledge her strength. It was a responsibility she hadn't sought, but one she accepted with grace. The spilled meal on a cold sidewalk had led to a reckoning, not just for one officer, but for a system. The quiet gavel of justice, though often slow and imperfect, had finally fallen. The termination of Officer Miller brought a measure of closure, but the scars of the ordeal remained with Maya. She found that even small, everyday encounters could trigger a jolt of anxiety. The sight of a police cruiser, a sudden authoritative voice. Healing, she realized, would be a journey, not a destination. Her new job at Hawthorne Solutions continued to be a source of stability and quiet pride. Her colleagues, who had followed her story in the news, treated her with a newfound respect, tinged with awe at her resilience. The anonymous gift cards had stopped, but Maya now had the means to provide for Nana Rose without that constant, gnawing fear of financial ruin. Noah Williams remained a steadfast presence in her life. Their shared fight had forged an unbreakable bond. The pretense of him being just a concerned citizen had long since faded. They spent more and more time together, their conversations evolving from strategy sessions to comfortable discussions about books, music, and dreams for the future. A quiet, tender affection was blossoming between them, nurtured by mutual respect and shared experience. One evening, Noah took Maya to a small, unassuming restaurant in the Bywater neighborhood, far from the glare of downtown. "I know this isn't exactly a celebration," he said, "but I wanted to mark, well, that you can finally breathe a little easier." Maya smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Noah. For everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you, and Ben, and everyone who stood up." "You were the one who stood up first, Maya," Noah reminded her gently. "You found your voice when it would have been easier to stay silent. That took incredible courage." They talked for hours that night, not about Officer Miller or the NOPD, but about themselves. Maya spoke of her dreams of one day perhaps going back to school, maybe studying social work, using her experiences to help others. Noah shared his passion for architecture, not just for designing beautiful buildings, but for creating spaces that uplifted communities. As they walked along the Mississippi River after dinner, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The scars were still there, a permanent part of her story, but they no longer defined her. They were a testament to her strength, to her survival. The legal battle wasn't entirely over. Ben Carter was still exploring options for a civil suit against the city on Maya's behalf, not for a large sum of money, but for an official acknowledgement of the harm done, and for policy changes within the NOPD to prevent future abuses. Maya was hesitant, weary of more conflict, but she trusted Ben and Noah's judgment. The most significant change, however, was within Maya herself. The timid, fearful young woman who had trembled before Officer Miller was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who had faced down injustice and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably stronger. She had found her starlight after the siren's blare. Months later, life had settled into a new, more hopeful rhythm for Maya Jones. The city's fervor over Officer Miller's termination had subsided, replaced by the ongoing, slower work of community groups advocating for police reform. The Independent Oversight Board released its report, recommending several changes to NOPD training and accountability, some of which were slowly, grudgingly, being implemented. Maya, with Noah's quiet encouragement and financial support, which she now gratefully accepted as a loan she was determined to repay, had enrolled in an evening sociology course at a local community college. It was a small step towards her dream of helping others, of understanding the systemic issues that had so profoundly impacted her own life. Her relationship with Noah had deepened into a loving, supportive partnership. They were an unlikely pair. The quiet, determined cleaning woman turned community college student and the successful, compassionate architect, but their shared values and mutual respect had built a strong foundation. One crisp Saturday morning, Maya and Noah were volunteering at a neighborhood cleanup event organized by Marcus Thorne's community group. It was hard work, clearing debris and planting flowers in a neglected park. But there was a sense of camaraderie, of people coming together to make their city a little better. As Maya knelt, patting soil around a newly planted sapling, she saw a familiar figure approaching. It was Officer David Chen. The young officer whose testimony had been so crucial. He was off duty, dressed in civilian clothes. He approached Maya hesitantly. "Miss Jones?" he said, his voice quiet. I wanted to say, I'm glad to see you doing well." Maya stood up, wiping dirt from her hands. "Officer Chen, thank you for what you did. It took a lot of courage. One end. Officer Chen." Chen shrugged, a rueful smile on his face. "It was the right thing to do. Took me too long to realize it. Miller, she gave a lot of us a bad name. Things are slowly changing. I hope. Your K's made a difference." They spoke for a few minutes, a quiet conversation between two people who had been on opposite sides of a difficult situation but had found common ground in the pursuit of truth. Later that day, as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the newly cleaned park, Noah pulled Maya aside. He didn't have a ring, no grand gesture. He simply took her hands in his. "Maya," he said, his voice full of emotion. "That first night, when I saw what happened to you, I just wanted to help. I didn't know it would lead to this." He looked into her eyes. "You've changed my life in ways I never expected. You've shown me what real strength, real grace looks like. I love you, Maya Jones. Will you build a life with me?" Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "Yes, Noah," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Their story wasn't a fairy tale ending. The fight for justice in their city and in the world was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new injustices to confront. But as Maya looked at Noah, at the hopeful faces of the community members around them, at the small sapling she had just planted, she knew that even one voice, one act of courage, one hand reaching out in kindness, could make a profound difference. The melody of her life, once nearly silenced by a harsh, discordant note, was now a rich, complex symphony, filled with starlight, resilience, and the undying echo of hope, and she would continue to play her part, with strength, with grace, and with an unwavering belief in the power of truth. The spilled meal was long gone, but the seeds of change it had inadvertently sown were now beginning to bloom. And sometimes, that's how the most beautiful, most enduring melodies are composed.